cold beer. What does that remind you of? Hot summer day by the pool? Fun-filled day at the ballpark? All the sweat hitting you on the face at a frat party? Or how about all the people that died and were murdered just so you can drink your sorrows away? Oh, you didn't know that? That's okay. Why don't you crack open a cold one or pour yourself a glass of wine, sit back, relax, and come learn about the history of alcohol. Let's go to our first stop in our history lesson, all the way to Mesopotamia, 10,000 BC. But it's actually just rumored that they started making beer then, so I don't really want to go there. There's not enough evidence to support it, so we're actually going to 6,000 BC to Georgia. Not that Georgia. I'm sure they love their beer just as much as this place. But I'm talking about the people of South Caucasus, where it is said that the first recording of wine is made. Wine, such a sophisticated drink. But these people were not the brightest. They actually were trying to figure out how to grow their grapes quicker, so they decided to bury them in the winter. And as you can imagine, nothing was sprouting. And they completely forgot about them. So a few decades have passed, and one of them was squatting over the crapper and suddenly remembered the grapes. He eagerly dug them up as he was hungry and found out they liquefied and tasted pretty good. So quickly after that, they perfectly learned how to make their wine and also to move their holes away where they did their business. Now, wine was all the craze. If you didn't know, alcohol gets you a bit loopy, and no doubt about it, this effect happened back then too. People love this stuff. Heck, even the animals did too. Everyone was happy, and it was such a delectable drink from the heavens. People had class and elegance, and the world was perfect for the next 2,000 years. Well, if the world was so great, then what happened? Well, now in Mesopotamia, 4,000 BC, some crazy Samaritans were trying some wacky things and brewing up a storm, literally. The invention of beer was born, and this swept the world right under its feet. Archaeologists found a lot of evidence showing that they definitely partied, including this poem that showed a recipe on how to make beer from barley. And this poem went hard. So hard it actually spread and finally hit a nearby place called Babylon. They loved this stuff too. So much though that in fact at the Code of Hammurabi, it was declared that a daily ration of beer was to be given to its people. Also that citizens could be paid in beer as well. This isn't even the best part. Archaeologists also found evidence that showed villagers drinking a bevy from a bowl with a straw. So they basically invented the fishbowl. And then wait a second, a straw for your beer? You have to drink straight from the can to enjoy a beer. Well, did I forget to mention back then that beer was not filtered too well, and actually was almost as thick as porridge. So they invented straws to make it easier to drink it. And yes, the reason straws exist is because of beer. From here, beer spread like nothing else before, going to Egypt all the way over to ancient Greece and Rome. Pretty much anyone that tried beer in this era quickly became a fan. Well, almost anyone. With the spread of beer happening so quickly, the wine snobs were not too into this, as they think that they had the best drink in the world. And this beer? It's so brash and not elegant. It was ruining everything that they have built over the past thousands of years, so they decided to come up with a plan. They heard these people who were just settling in, so leaders of the Secret Wine Society, or the SWS, gathered up some members and sent them over to Japan. Here they were sharing the secrets on how to perfectly make the best wine. The Emperor Korai seemed quite impressed with this wine, but he thought it was lacking something. And this pissed off the SWS. They were insulted, and they told the Japanese if they start making this wine, that they would regret it. But Korai loved what alcohol did, and he told them back that he would just tell the world of their secret society. But it was said that all the SWS did was leave silently. However, the next day, one of Korai's consorts was found dead in the hall. Still afraid of the SWS though, they decided they were not going to make wine, but also had no other access to that delectable drink that they heard of beer. But what they did have was a poem. You see, a salesman came by and was humming a tune on how to make beer. But they didn't have any barley, but what they did have was a lot of rice. You see, they started actually cultivating rice around this era, and cultivating they did. They had so much rice that they didn't even know what to do with it, until a soldier started humming the poem in front of the leader of Japan, and he realized that both of these are grains. So why can't they just use rice instead of barley? So around 300 BC, sake was invented. Now, due to how it's made by fermenting rice, it would mean it's actually more of a beer. However, they decided to call it a rice wine just to piss off the SWS. And pissed off they were. And we'll get back to that in a little bit, because in Greece, around 100 AD, something big is happening. A philosopher of the name Alexander of Aphrodisias was setting up a pot of tea and left his home. Seeing Alexander leave, another philosopher named Celsus snuck by and replaced his pot of water with salt water as a prank. But when Alexander came back, he noticed most of his water was spread around and he didn't really think much of it and made a cup of tea anyway. Celsus saw him drinking this and was very confused why Alexander wasn't spitting it out. He confronted him and they both were a little bit puzzled. So after a few days of alchemy, Alexander figured something out. He asked Celsus to come over and said, "Yo, Cel, see this?" And showed him that he could take salt water, boil it, and make it into regular drinking water, a process called distilling. Now you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with anything? Well, this is what sparked so many innovations in the alcoholic world that we know today. But it's also what brought pain and suffering to many over the next 100 of years. So, news of this new technique started spreading around the world, and eventually many different kinds of distilleries have been developed. This is, however, not as simple as it sounds. Let's start in the state of Jalisco, Mexico, 300 AD. The Aztec Indians took the bountiful fields of the agave plant and used it to make a ceremonial wine. They thought of this gift from the gods and swore it was all thanks to a volcano not too far from them. They even made the buildings in the shape of it to pay tribute. The Aztecs would get away with making wine like this for a while, but the SWS did catch on eventually, and over years and years of fighting, they were wiped out of existence. However, in the 16th century, a man known as Don Julio discovered a scroll in one of the hidden rooms in one of the ancient Aztec pyramids. This scroll had what actually happened to the Aztec Indians and explained how amazing this golden liquid was from the heavens. Don was amazed, and he wanted to bring back this long-lost culture. However, he was weary about what happened to them, so he did make a few tweaks to the recipe. And lo and behold, in the town currently known today as Tequila, Mexico, the first tequila distillery was created there. But let's back up to the year 700 AD. Russia and Poland wanted in on this new era of alchemy, but due to the weather, they didn't have too much there. But they did have potatoes and grains, which just so happens to be what you need to make vodka. Sadly, there was just not enough documentation around this time period, as everyone was drunk 24/7. There are still disputes and fights to this day whether it was Poland or Russia who actually first created vodka. Now, welcome to the millennium. We'll head over to Ireland and Scotland, because word finally got to them about this distilling thing, and some monasteries, out of everyone, ended up trying to distill grain mash since they did not have much else, and thus producing whiskey. The SWS was not having this and eventually convinced King Henry the Eighth to dissolve these monasteries. But they didn't realize that letting these monks be free would cause more harm, because these monks, all they knew was distillery thing, so they opened their own distilleries. So by now, the SWS is hearing how all of these new disgraces of drinks are popping up. And some members figured, if you can't beat them, why not join them? So in the year 1313, they headed up to France, and they were going to try something insane. They went and distilled some wine. The result? A huge mistake. And also what we know today as brandy. The members who told of the secrets of the most perfect wine recipe were promptly executed, and the SWS figured they must start only giving the utmost important people of this organization the recipe. So they traveled to Nova Scotia, Canada, and on a small island covered in many oak trees, they buried the secrets of the SWS. Back in France, however, a small poor boy who was scavenging for some food in the trash nearby heard everything and eavesdropped on them. He would later study what he could remember hearing, and thus Jas Hennessy would continue making brandy. The people of France loved this drink and called it l'eau de vie, or the water of life. Inspired by hearing that France had a miracle water, the Dutch were in hot pursuit as they needed a miracle with how many people were getting sick at this time. So in 1550, a physicist named Franciscus Sylvius invented a medicine out of the juniper berry and was giving it to patients. Oddly enough, no one was getting better, but people became more cheerful and stopped caring about all these deaths, so it was a win. Thus, gin was born. And as you can guess who wasn't happy about this? The SWS started spreading rumors and lies, and the Dutch and Spanish got into a war for over 80 years. And if you thought that was dark, the history actually gets darker, as the rum we know and love today was actually invented and a big part of the slave trade. And this was around the 1650s. A bit after this time, however, there were two men on a transport ship, Jack and Morgan, and they just had enough of this. They actually stole some ships and declared themselves captains, and they were trying to free as many slaves as possible. They actually would start their own distilleries and proceeded to help fund the North in the Revolutionary War. And finish with the Revolutionary War, they realized that there was another one going on too. And something needed to stop. So many people of the world, separated by the drinks that they love, are fighting over something so stupid. Why can't we all just love the same thing? Drinking a good drink, no matter what it is. So they decided to call out to all the heads of the top distilleries and have a meeting in Long Island, New York. Here, they discussed long and hard, but eventually all came to an agreement to end this fighting. And everyone seemed to be in high spirits and sharing a bit of their own special drinks. But not everyone, obviously, was happy. During this time, over the hundreds of years, the SWS was actually much bigger than anyone had ever thought. They have been making changes and pulling strings in the shadows for so long, but that is a tale for another day. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed learning about the history of alcohol and how it came to be. So with that, cheers.